Well, I guess Victor was right what he said about the dinosaurs. Here's a look at the McFarlane toys. Batman fighting the frozen Page Puncher's Mr. Freeze. Theorizing absolute zero experimentation would slow the disease inflicting his wife Nora, Mr. Freeze and his beloved bride are accidentally thrust 16,000 years into the past. Seeking to return to their proper century, the frigid fiend attempts to recreate the unintentional circumstances of his time manipulation experiment, callously unleashing a deadly new ice age upon the surrounding lands. Robin, a brave young warrior from the neighboring tribe, pleads for aid from Batman, the noble leader of the Bat Clan. Recognizing the existential threat of his peoples, Batman, Robin, and a stoic Batgirl forge an alliance to stop the criminal King of Cold. Uh-oh, Weatherman is calling for pretty low temperature drops in prehistoric parts. I better pack my saber-toothed tiger parka. Before we get a closer look at the Batman fight the frozen Mr. Freeze, let's first grab the tape measure as well and see how tall the figure stands. I'd also as well like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample, not only of Mr. Freeze that we're about to have a look at, backtrack just a bit, the Batman we also already had a look at, and the upcoming Robin and Batgirl that will be coming shortly to this channel. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, though, the chilling Mr. Freeze is 7 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 18 centimeters tall. I would imagine that sliding in this suit would be rather difficult, but we can certainly do that as a figure. Let's slide over the Freeze that we're about to have a look at and bring in the earlier looked at Batman. Now, I will say one thing about this is Mr. Freeze, if you were looking at this as like one large suit that he's wearing, I feel like the figure probably could have been a little bit tad taller than what we're getting right here. Clearly is the case when you're looking at the two figures. Victor Freeze is quite shorter than when you're looking at, say, Bruce Wayne. That's probably not going to be his real name back then, but the equivalent of that's the Batman from the Bat Clan. Yeah, rather, I mean, I would have loved if this figure could have been done as, say, a Build-A-Figure, where much larger pieces could have been collected, as we say, looked at all, I guess in this case probably would have been 3 figures rather than 4, but maybe as a Build-A-Figure piece. I think really Mr. Freeze as a Bat figure would have looked fantastic. He still looks good, though, granted, but he's just a little bit on a short side for me. One thing I would say Victor isn't short on is the accessories that the figure comes included with. As, of course, as always the case, the figure's going to come included with a comic if he's a Page Puncher figure. And this time around, we do get, again, the first and only issue, I'm guessing, of Fighting the Frozen, with this time around Mr. Freeze featured on the front. How many F's did I just say there? I'm just going to bring in no Batman's cover so you can see. Like, the covers are going to be very differently done, but if you, though, look through the actual pages, the pages are exactly the same. That's always the case when we look at these Page Puncher figures. The artwork, though, is fantastic on this, and really of the two, I'm obviously being quite biased by saying that the Mr. Freeze cover, I think, is a lot cooler. I'm going to try to reserve the number of puns I'm going to say in the course of this review. Just really like the artwork, and I really like the suit of Mr. Freeze here. That suit also, if you'd like to take yourself a souvenir of that, comes also included with a trading card. So if this is something that you can't obviously fold up, don't fold it up, whatever you do, and try to put it in your pocket. The card, though, is a much more easier to access, much easier to transport around with you. Smaller version of that same cool cover. The artwork, again, I don't know if you can actually see, does have a bat symbol behind him. But again, like just the artwork on this guy. And flip this around to the back, the name Mr. Freeze doesn't actually say Victor Freeze. It only simply just names the name of the character, the villain character. And then the paragraph, while being a little on the longer side, is the exact same read-up that we got as well with Batman. So there's nothing really being done differently. And speaking of the Batman, I'm just going to reach to the side and grab the Batman trading cards so you can see, like, they're exactly in the same, in the sense that the back sections, except for obviously this part right here, the read-ups are going to be exactly the same, but at least we've got ourselves source material featured on the front. I'm going to move those cards out of the way. Those will be going into my sheet protectors really shortly after this review. The figure also comes included with a display stand. Nothing really different here. I had a little, I don't know, like a piece of styrofoam or something left on there. But other than that, nothing really new to report here. It's still the same DC logoed stand with the same DC logo printed down below here, and one small peg off to the side that can attach to either one of Mr. Freeze's feet. Going to move that to the side. The figure also comes included with his freeze gun. Of course, attaching the freeze gun, he has to have a source of power. The thing that feeds to the gun is actually the big tank that he has on the back of the body. Both actually, in both of the cases, just going to kind of hold the gun next to the tank. The coloring on this, as well as the coloring on Mr. Freeze, is kind of hard to pinpoint. In a way, it looks like it's kind of a greenish, silverish gray. Take that with whatever you want. But as you can see, it's a really interesting looking tank. In a way, I kind of wish that they could have added a little bit something else to this. I mean, I really like the coloring, but like little icicles would have really gone a long way. I think also if they just frosted it just a little bit, so it would look like it's super cold to the touch. I mean, there's a little bit of blue that's added to the side here of the gun, but none of that. It's pretty much just molded to the only plastic color. And then this section right here looks like it's an attached piece. It's the hoses that run, of course, from the tank to the gun itself. When you are attaching this to Mr. Freeze, I notice there is a specific way to do this. Now, if you flip the figure around to the back, you can see there's obviously the little hole there. If you put the tank this way, now before you tell me down below it's the wrong way, it is actually, well, it's the wrong way in the sense that if you want to have the cable on this side, first of all, he doesn't have a gripping hand. So if you want to try to put it on this way, then of course you're now starting to stretch the plastic of the tubes. Rather, the correct way, it seems, is this way here. I'm sure many of people are already telling me that down below here. The little nozzle there, the little at the top there, I don't think it actually makes that noise, but the little part to the top, the pointier top to the tank, actually will be the thing that's facing forward. Just before we actually look at Mr. Freeze, I want to show you guys just the detail work done to the tank alone. You got little meters there, of course, little knobs and little dials and stuff that he can turn. It all looks like it's also run like automatic, where it's got little pulley systems that move this. Seems a little bit more outdated for Mr. Freeze, the fact that he's actually constructing a somewhat temperature machine that takes him back 16,000 years. I feel like the tank is a little more outdated, but it kind of goes really well with the designing of the character anyways. He has sort of that old vintage subterranean scuba suit going on there. By the way, you can take the gun, and because he only has the gripping hand on the one side, you obviously only have one choice to choose from. Just fit that into his hand. There we go. And pop that all the way in. And then Mr. Freeze, of course, now has his gun. Adding, though, to that, I wished, again, like they could have added a few little icicles or something on the end of the gun, so it actually looks like he's been using it. But man, it does look quite good, though, in Mr. Freeze's hands. I think for right now, though, what I will do is just take the tank off. There is, by the way, no section that I can see, at least, where this attaches. If they had only added like a little peg, something you could have actually attached this to, say, the side of the tank, if you didn't always want to have Mr. Freeze holding the gun, there really would have been a nice little place that they could add like a little peg or something like that. But I'm going to just take this off for right now, just because, again, like it's going to make things a little bit easier when it comes to looking at the figure. And certainly when it gets to tackling the articulation on him, it's going to be a lot easier not having a tank on the back of the figure's body. Spin this, though, back around to the front. Again, looking at the head sculpt here, it's sort of like a vintage-looking scuba suit. You only really get the red eyes of Mr. Freeze. I don't even know if that's his red eyes. It's probably, I think, the machine. Based on the comic, it seems to be the eyes from the machine, like the internal machine of the suit that he's basically wearing here. Because at one point, it looks like it's cracked, and you can kind of still see his eyes underneath it. But, I mean, like, it's a really interesting-looking suit. Mostly done here in silver, but again, like trying to describe this color, this time around, unlike the tank, it clearly looks more like a darker gray. And then he's got all these little additional silver patches that he's added in there as well. Now, on the side, it seems to be the case, like I'm just going to go back to the comic here, for example. On the comic, it almost seems to be the case that these are icicles. And you just quickly, again, flipping through this, I want to find a good, now see, like right here, this looks like it's fur. Or it's sort of the equivalent of fur sticking out the shoulders and the sections of his gloves. But then looking at the front of it, doesn't actually look like icicles. So I can't tell whether if the things that are sticking out from his body is just escaping air that's freezing. Like right here, it does actually look like it's ice. I'm willing to bet that this is actually ice and not specifically fur. But again, like just to look through, where was that page I want to look at? When he's inside, say, the room, I would imagine that the ice would have already melted. I'm still going to stick with the idea that that's supposed to be ice. The ice itself, though painted this time around in white, it's actually more of a softer plastic. It's all like trimmed around the sides of his shoulders, and he's got a few little areas here sticking out the ends of his sleeve. It doesn't seem to be the case on this side, so maybe he's controlling the temperature better on this side of his body, and like the temperature sort of escaping, the cold escaping out the side here, causing maybe these icicles to form. But like the shape and the body of the character really does look good. He's got all these little levers and dials there on the front of the figure's body. He also seems like he's got these little ice capsules that he's likely going to be using to fill the cartridge, of course, for the tank. I mean, it isn't quite the same size, or unless maybe those are icicle grenades, for example. But again, like, it's just a really neat looking figure. He's got large, very clunky looking boots, still retain articulation, but he's got some nice additional riveted points that they've added in there as well. Like, there's nothing really I would say I dislike about the figure, other than I just think he could have been a little bit bigger than what he is right now. Just imagine this guy, if you will, like this much bigger and a little bit bigger and bulkier. Yeah, that would be a really great bath figure had they gone that direction instead. For the figure's articulation, going back to his big giant dome here, the head is on a ball joint, despite what seems to be limitations for his head sculpt, which again, I'll just kind of rotate around so you guys can see everything from all the detail standpoints. Like the way really that the helmet looks like it's been hammered in, like he hand forged it himself. As well, really, like all the armor that he has on his body looks like he's been like denting it and hammering it out himself. Probably wasn't going to be using a hammer, but it definitely looks a little more cruder in design. Head sculpt, though, being on a ball joint, does have the head looking up that far. You can have the head looking down, but really by looking it down, it's only going to be, it won't be able to move any further forward or any further down than what it is right now. Head can also rock back and forth also. The shoulders do rotate all the way around. Now, these spikes of ice, I'm again leaning to believe that these are spikes, are soft enough, at least on plastic, that if you wanted to say move his arm, the plastic isn't the type that's going to be breaking necessarily. There's obviously a little bit of give at play there. The shoulders come out, or shoulders allow the arms to come out 90 degrees. The figure does have not a bicep swivel necessarily, but he has rather instead a forearm swivel and moves back and forth there. He has only just a single hinge possessing in his elbow, and the hands rotate also all the way around. He's got all these additional dials there on the sides of his sleeves. Now, what's rather interesting, though, is if you look on this side, I keep drawing my attention away from looking at the figure's blasted posability, but if you look at this side, he actually has dials. Maybe he's controlling, again, the temperature better on this side. He doesn't have dials on this side, but again, like that could be temperature control for like all the rest of the figure's body. I'm analyzing this probably a little bit too much. But body still, though, is on a ball joint, so you can move it back and forth this way. You can't really rotate also the body all the way around. There's nothing really necessarily getting in the way. You just kind of have to worry that the tanks don't hit this front of the figure's body. That'll escape the temperature, and Victor Fries, I'm sure, will die. You don't want that. The figure's feet do move forward. They do move out. They do split as well. This is, by the way, all softer plastic. One thing I will say, though, about moving the legs too far forward all the time is it does then leave behind sort of this gap space. I've not yet caught myself doing this in the review, but after I've been kind of playing and moving the figure around for a few minutes, like just prior to hitting a record, I did notice like I had to kind of smooth it back down. Because if you're moving it too much further forward like this, it sort of does leave that little gap space between the thigh and the inside cavity of what would be his lower torso. The figure does have knee articulation, and every single time I do this, I tell you, I keep pinching myself. Right here, I pinch myself either in the ankle or I pinch myself right at the back of the leg. Nobody cares. Either way, though, the bend in the knee allows at least the lower leg to rotate back and forth. What they've rather done cleverly is that they've added the kneecap to the top of the leg, not to the bottom. So even when you are bending and rotating the knee, you'll see that it moves rather nicely underneath the knee pad. The boots themselves don't move any bit after this point here. I mean, they're only simply just sculpted in place. In a way that kind of look at this, it looks like there's a cut right here where I would swear to you I'd be able to rotate that, but that's just the way they've sculpted the figure. Rather, though, he does have a hinge joint back and forth on the ankle. Don't pinch yourself, please. Back and forth this way as well. And the figure also has toe articulation, even though he's got really large boots. Big toe articulation. But for me, at least, the figure of this wave, and it's probably a little bit hard to kind of say that now because we've yet to really look at Robin. We've yet to look at Batgirl. In a way, though, that kind of diminishes the value of Batgirl and Robin. Let's just get the figure on his display stand. I don't want to be, while I'm talking away, have the figure falling at all. But yeah, the figure does look fantastic in Mr. Freeze. Now, as well, in addition to this one here, let's get him to stand. In addition to the one that we get here from McFarlane's team, this, of course, is part of the Fighting the Frozen wave. They have as well, thank you, released a black and white version of this figure that we will be also looking at in an upcoming video. Essentially taking the same design of the characters, sucking away all the colors, leaving really behind a basic white body. And then he's also going to have like the additional black detailing added on top of that. Like I said, we will be looking at in the upcoming review. All in all, though, a great looking figure. The only thing I would certainly say, though, is just a little bit of touching up, adding a little bit of icicles onto the gun, for example, maybe also as well to the tank. And maybe if had only the figure just been a little bit bigger. That's the only thing I would have said. Other than that, though, if you get the chance, have maybe no real interest to get the rest of the cave people. That's Batman, that's Robin, that's Batgirl. But at least you did like the Mr. Freeze. Definitely it's worth picking up, though. It's a fun figure to have on the shelf. Now, I will admit I'm a bit behind when it comes to reading Batman comics to tell you if this design of Mr. Freeze lived any further past the pages of Fighting the Frozen. If it wasn't the case, feel like it's a missed opportunity that DC didn't carry over a rather terrifying portrayal of Victor Freeze sort of inside a scuba suit, which is a rather different take on the character. Instead of actually being able to see his face under a clear dome, what we get rather instead is two large beady little eyes looking right at you. Speaking though of missed opportunities, something I did already talk about in this review, a missed opportunity I feel by not releasing this guy as a Build-A-Figure. It may have also involved them having to release a fourth figure from this wave, and maybe they had planned at one point to do a Build-A-Figure of Frozen Mr. Freeze, but yeah, just think if this guy was maybe about half a size bigger, maybe more in line with like the recently looked at Doomsday, for example. Just big, just bulky, just menacing. I think Mr. Freeze here looks good now, but just think of how much better he could have potentially looked if he was a Build-A-Figure instead. I also, from certainly a standpoint of people that were maybe on the fence of getting the other three figures, let's just say, for example, like myself, they love the Mr. Freeze, but they have really remotely no interest to get the Batman, the Robin, or the Batgirl. At least the incentive from a standpoint of selling these figures by adding included larger Build-A-Figure pieces for Mr. Freeze here, there were at least the nudge in the direction of getting the collectors to pick up the other figures, at least to then build the Mr. Freeze. Other than being bigger and bulkier, I think he really turned out to be a great looking Mr. Freeze. And I would love to see this look of Mr. Freeze, again, survive beyond the pages of Fighting Forever, or Fighting the Frozen, not Fighting Forever. Big thank you once again, though, to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the Batman Page Punchers Fighting the Frozen, not Forever, Fighting the Frozen, Mr. Freeze. Have you had the chance to pick up this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And also, would you guys like to have seen this figure be in fact released as a collect Build-A-Figure, a BA or BAF figure, rather than actually being sold separately? That way he could be a little bit larger, a little bit more imposing, a little bit cooler Mr. Freeze. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on this figure. Also, as well, if you guys are interested and would like to get this one for yourself, it should be available over on Entertainment Earth. The figure, as well as the earlier looked at Batman, as well as the Robin and the Batgirl that we will be looking at, should be over there as well. Also, if you guys are interested, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to hit with a like, if you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly would like to stick around for more, because like I said, we are going to still be looking at the Robin and we are still going to be looking at the Batgirl to round out the remaining two figures of the 4-figure Page Punchers wave. Courtesy, again, the folks over at McFarlane Toys. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.